I noticed the sharp pang of fear in Parker's eyes as soon as I approached the park bench where he sat alone. The setting sun cast long shadows, but I could see his tear-stained cheeks glistening. My heart sank when he turned to me and asked in a small voice, "Why does Mommy say I'm not real family, Grandma?" Those words cut deep. I pulled him into a tight embrace, feeling his little body tremble with confusion and hurt. How could Corinne be so cruel to an innocent child? Anger bubbled inside me, but I kept my tone gentle as I assured Parker, "Of course you're real family, sweetheart. Don't ever doubt that." Parker sniffled, clinging to me. "But she didn't invite me to Leah's party. She said it was just for the real family." His brow furrowed as he recalled Corinne's heartless words. I stroked his hair, fighting back tears of my own. "Come on, let's get some dinner and we can talk more, okay?" Parker nodded, slipping his small hand into mine as we headed to the cozy diner down the street. Over grilled cheese sandwiches and fries, Parker opened up about the games Corinne made him play, like being locked in his room for hours when she got mad. My stomach churned at the thought of my sweet grandson being treated that way. Determined to protect him, I promised we'd make sure those games never happened again. That night, I barely slept, my mind racing with how to confront this situation. One thing was clear: Corinne's behavior towards Parker had crossed a line, and I wouldn't stand by and let it continue. First thing in the morning, I'd talk to Colin and get to the bottom of this. After a restless night, I picked Parker up from Colin and Corinne's house early the next morning for our usual Saturday breakfast tradition at the local diner. He greeted me with a bright smile, clearly putting aside the pain from yesterday. Still, I couldn't shake the knot in my stomach over what he'd revealed. As we slid into our usual booth, Parker chattered excitedly about the new video game he wanted. I listened with a forced smile, my mind elsewhere. When our food arrived, I decided it was time to gently probe further. "Parker, you know how you told me about those games Corinne makes you play?" I began cautiously. He nodded through a mouthful of pancakes. "Yeah, like when she locks me in my room. It's not so fun, but she says it's to teach me lessons." My heart dropped. "Does she lock you in there for a long time?" "Uh-huh, sometimes for hours." He shrugged as if it were nothing. "She only lets me out to eat dinner if I'm good." White-hot anger flashed through me, but I kept my expression neutral. "And does Daddy know about these games?" Parker hesitated, then shook his head slowly. "No, Corinne says it's our little secret and that Daddy wouldn't understand." I fought back tears, realization dawning. This was no game, it was abuse, plain and simple. And that manipulative witch had brainwashed my grandson into keeping it hidden from his own father. Reaching across the table, I took Parker's little hands in mine. "Sweetheart, that's not okay. No grown-up should ever lock a child away like that, even as a game. It's very wrong." His eyes widened with confusion and worry. "But," Corinne said. "I know, honey." I cut him off gently. "But Corinne isn't telling the truth. Those aren't games at all." For a long moment, Parker stared at me, processing what I'd said. Then his lower lip began to tremble. I don't understand." Pulling him into a fierce hug, I whispered fiercely, "It's going to be okay, Parker. I promise you, Grandma's going to make sure nothing like that ever happens again." After dropping Parker back off, I wasted no time confronting my son Colin about what was going on in his household. He agreed to meet me at a cafe downtown during his lunch break. Colin looked tired but smiled warmly when he saw me. As we hugged, I struggled to keep my anger in check. How could he not know the cruelty his own son was enduring? "You look stressed, Mom. Everything okay?" he asked as we took our seats. I took a deep breath. "Colin, we need to talk about Parker and the way Corinne has been treating him." His brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? Corinne loves Parker like her own." "Does she?" I challenged, keeping my voice low, "because Parker told me some very disturbing things about games Corinne makes him play." Colin's expression darkened. "What kind of games?" Meeting his gaze steadily, I relayed what Parker had told me about being locked away for hours, only released for meals if he was good. With each word, I saw the blood drain from my son's face. "No, Corinne wouldn't," he stammered, shaking his head in denial. "Parker also said she made him keep it a secret from you because you wouldn't understand." I pressed on, my voice thick with barely contained fury. Why is your wife isolating and punishing your child behind your back? Colin slumped back in his chair, eyes wide with horror and disbelief. For a long moment he was speechless. When he finally found his voice, it was strained and quiet. I had no idea. He dragged a hand down his face, clearly shaken. Mom, you have to believe me. If I'd known... My heart broke for him, but I refused to let misplaced sympathy cloud my judgment, not when Parker's well-being was at stake. I believe you, I said firmly. But that doesn't make this okay, Colin. That woman is abusing your son, psychologically, if not physically. This has to stop. Colin flinched at the word abuse, his eyes haunted, but he gave a slow, pained nod. You're right. He looked at me pleadingly. What do we do? Reaching across the table, I squeezed his hand. First, we document everything. Every incident, every shred of evidence we can find. And then we take it to the authorities. There was no other choice. As much as it killed me to hurt my own son this way, Corinne's true colors had been revealed, and I would do whatever it took to protect my grandson. After my tense meeting with Colin, I knew I needed reinforcements in this battle against Corinne. There was only one person who loved Parker as fiercely as I did, his biological mother, Elsie. I hadn't spoken to Elsie in years, not since her bitter divorce and custody battle with Colin. She'd been devastated when the judge awarded Colin full custody, deeming his higher income and stable home environment the better choice for Parker. I remember how heartbroken she was, having to leave her son behind. Tracking down her number, I psyched myself up before making the call. When Elsie answered, her voice was laced with surprise and caution. Lena, is everything okay? Not exactly, I admitted heavily. It's about Parker. There's something you need to know. I proceeded to lay it all out. Parker's revelations about being locked away, Corinne's manipulative secrecy, the signs of psychological abuse. As I spoke, Elsie's shocked silence stretched longer and longer. Oh my God, she finally whispered, her voice cracking with horror and guilt. How did I not see this coming? I knew that woman was trouble, but I never imagined. Neither of us could have predicted this level of cruelty, I assured her, trying to keep my tone calm and reassuring despite my own anger. What matters now is getting Parker away from her. You're right. You're absolutely right. Elsie took a shaky breath. Please tell me you have a plan, Lena. I'll do anything at all to protect my son. Relieved to have her on board, I outlined my initial ideas, documenting every incident, gathering testimonies from teachers or friends who may have witnessed anything suspicious, anything to build an airtight case. Once we have solid proof, we take it to the authorities and fight for full custody, I stated firmly. I won't let Parker suffer another day under that woman's thumb. There was a determined edge to Elsie's voice when she responded. Neither will I. That evil bitch doesn't know what's coming for her. At last, we were a united front, two mothers willing to go to war for the well-being of our little boy. Corinne didn't stand a chance against the fury she'd unleashed. Over the next few weeks, I became a woman possessed. Documenting every potential incident of Corinne's abuse towards Parker consumed my waking hours. I kept a meticulous log, recording dates, times, and details no matter how seemingly insignificant. Colin was my inside source, keeping me updated on any troubling behavior he witnessed at home. The guarded, haunted look never left his eyes these days. Part of me ached for the emotional turmoil he must be enduring, but the other part couldn't help but feel he should have seen the signs sooner. Elsie and I communicated constantly, united in our determination to gather as much evidence as possible. She spoke to Parker's teachers, friends' parents, anyone who could potentially corroborate the pattern of neglect and psychological torment. A few times, I caught glimpses of the old Corinne through Colin's exhausted recounts, a doting wife and mother one moment, lashing out with cruel indifference the next. It made my blood boil to imagine Parker subjected to such an unstable, toxic environment. She just snapped at him over leaving a toy in the living room. Colin told me one night, shoulders slumped with defeat, called him worthless and said he was going to his room until he learned to be a decent human being. White-hot rage lanced through me. He's 8 years old, I hissed furiously. What kind of monster talks that way to a child? Colin could only shake his head helplessly. I knew it killed him to see the truth about his wife's twisted nature, But I refused to show any sympathy. Not when Parker's well-being was at stake. The final straw came when I installed hidden cameras in the house and reviewed the footage a week later. There it was, clear as day. Video of Corinne shoving Parker into his room and dead-bolting the door from the outside, the blank look of cold indifference on her face chilling me to the bone. That was all the proof I needed. Elsie and I immediately contacted a lawyer to begin the custody proceedings. There would be no more waiting, no more allowing this vile woman unchecked access to my grandson. It was time for Corinne to reap what she'd sown. And not a force on earth would stop me from protecting Parker and getting him the loving home he deserved. With our case file thick with damning evidence, Elsie, Colin, and I knew it was time to confront Corinne directly. We arranged to meet her at the house one evening after she returned from work. The tension was suffocating as we waited in the living room. Colin's knee bounced anxiously, while Elsie's hands were clenched into white-knuckled fists. As for me, I was rigid with determined fury, willing my anger to fuel me rather than spiral out of control. At last, we heard Corinne's key in the lock. She blustered in with her usual self-important air, pulling up short when she saw the three of us waiting grimly. "Well, this is a surprise," she said with forced brightness. "What's going on?" I stood, leveling her with my most withering glare. "Don't play dumb, Corinne. We know everything." Her brow furrowed in mock confusion. "I'm not sure I understand." "We have proof of how you've been treating Parker," Elsie cut her off, voice laced with contempt. "Videos, testimonies, all of it." In an instant, the fake smile slipped from Corinne's face. Her eyes narrowed to slits. "You've been spying on me?" "We had to," Colin said quietly, once we knew what was really going on. For a long, tense moment, Corinne simply stared at us in disbelieving fury. Finally, she seemed to find her voice again. "You judgmental fools have no idea what it's like," she exploded, "having to deal with that little brat 24/7 after you abandoned him." She whirled on Elsie. "He's nothing but a constant reminder of your failure as a wife." Elsie recoiled like she'd been slapped, face pale. Disgusted, I stepped forward, unflinching even as Corinne's furious glare turned to me. "That little brat is a child, you deranged harpy. How dare you punish and demean an innocent boy just to soothe your own miserable insecurities?" "He's my stepson," Corinne snarled, spit flying. "I'll discipline him however I see fit. You'd all see that if you weren't blinded by your ridiculous attachment to that sniveling little—" "Enough!" Colin's roar silenced us all. He was deathly pale, shaking with rage and revulsion. "I've heard enough," he said in a deadly quiet voice. "Mother, Elsie, show her the evidence, every last sickening second of it." As video clips and documentation spilled out, incontrovertible proof of the psychological torment Parker had endured, Corinne's sneering arrogance gradually melted away, replaced by ashen horror and fear. For once, the monster had been laid bare, and there would be no innocuous discipline defense to hide behind. Not this time, not ever again. The ensuing custody battle was nothing short of a war. Corinne's high-priced lawyers tried every underhanded tactic to discredit our evidence and paint her as a doting stepmother just trying to instill discipline. I wanted to vomit at their transparent lies. But we had the trump card. Cold, hard proof of Corinne's mental and emotional abuse captured on video. No amount of courtroom theatrics could erase those chilling images of her berating Parker, locking him away for hours on end with cruel indifference. On the stand, Corinne was a master of faux tears and remorse. "I only wanted what was best for Parker," she simpered to the blank-faced judge. "Yes, I made some mistakes, but I've learned from them. Taking him away from his father would be unfair punishment." Elsie could barely contain her rage during that pitiful performance. I had to grip her arm to keep her from leaping up and unleashing the torrent of fury she'd been holding back. When it was finally our turn, we let the videos speak for themselves. You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom as scene after scene of Corinne's calculated cruelty played out. The judge's eyes remained an inscrutable mask. Colin's sworn testimony, however, proved to be the final nail in Corinne's coffin. With hollow eyes, my son quietly, unflinchingly confirmed every word, every recorded instant of abuse inflicted on his own child, the child he should have protected all along. "I failed Parker in the worst way," he said, voice thick with self-loathing. I failed to see the woman I loved for the vindictive monster she truly is. I can never make up for that, but I can make sure he's never exposed to her poisonous influence again. You could have heard a pin drop after that. Even Corinne's slick lawyers seemed to realize the futility of pushing back any further. In the end, the judge's ruling was severe but fair. Full custody was awarded to Elsie, with strict orders that Corinne have zero contact or visitation rights with Parker. Moreover, the court directed Child Services to launch a full investigation into potential criminal charges for child endangerment. As the sentence was read, I watched a kaleidoscope of emotions flicker across Corinne's face. Disbelief, rage, terror. Good. Let the repercussions finally catch up to her twisted actions. Beside me, Colin sat in numb silence, awash in the realization that his beloved wife had been a complete and utter lie this entire time. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was overshadowed by sheer overwhelming relief. Parker was finally safe. Corinne's reign of terror was over. In the weeks following the custody ruling, I found myself wrestling with a tangled knot of emotions. Relief that Parker was finally free from Corinne's toxic grasp. Vindication that justice had been served, but also lingering anger towards my son Colin for being so blind, and devastation over the fracture in our once solid family. Whenever I went to visit Parker at Elsie's place, my heart swelled with joy to see him smiling and carefree once more. The wary, haunted look had faded from his eyes, replaced by the bright, innocent exuberance of any typical 8-year-old boy. Seeing him thrive in his mother's care soothed the guilt I'd felt over not acting sooner. "Thank you for saving me, Grandma," he said simply one day as we played catch in the backyard. In that moment, all the turmoil had been worth it. Still, the chasm between Colin and I remained. We spoke infrequently, our conversations stilted and awkward. The betrayal he felt, realizing he'd been duped by the woman he loved, ran soul deep. I understood his pain, but my own protective instincts overruled any sympathy. He should have seen Corinne for what she was long ago. As for Corinne herself, I quickly shut down any attempt she made to reach out, be it texts, calls, even letters arriving at my doorstep, each more desperate and vitriolic than the last. Let her rage at the consequences of her own actions. She'd never be allowed near Parker or anyone in our family again. The final unconscionable blow came when word trickled back that Corinne's own lawyer had dropped her case, unwilling to proceed with the criminal child endangerment investigation. Served her right, I thought bitterly. See how it feels to be utterly alone and discarded. Months later, on a crisp autumn day, Elsie invited us all to the park for a family picnic, her, Parker, Colin, and I. The first time we'd all been together, drama-free, in longer than I could remember. As I watched Parker chase leaves, grinning ear to ear, with Colin and Elsie looking on with matching peaceful smiles, I felt something loosen in my chest. This life, this tender new beginning, it was all I'd fought for. Meeting my son's eyes, I gave him a subtle nod of acknowledgement and solidarity. Though our relationship remained fragile, I knew we'd persevere. We had to, for the sake of the exuberant little boy before us, finally allowed to just be a child again. It was the least we could give him after everything he'd endured, a fair, loving chance at life, something Corinne's hatred had nearly stolen away forever.